The Riverlands can be one of the more forgettable kingdoms within the Seven Kingdoms, since they're only really known for being in an unfortunate location. The Riverlands usually gets hit the hardest during wars between kingdoms, being situated dart in the middle, with no natural defense in case of an invasion, easy prey. But like every other kingdom, the Riverlords traditionally had their children born out of wedlock labeled with a name to separate them from the main house, so everyone knew they were less than. The bastards from this location were given the fitting surname of Rivers, for the massive forking river that carves through here. Easily one of my top 3 favorite characters is one of these bastards, so I couldn't help but make this video. Brynden Rivers wasn't even born in the Riverlands, but still got stuck with his name. And you can't talk about this character's backstory without bringing up his half-brother Aegon Rivers. Both half-Targaryens were born in King's Landing, to one of the worst kings in this story's history. So not sure why they got the name Rivers instead of Waters, like all the other bastards born in the Crownlands. This fat oaf's name was King Aegon IV. Brynden and Aegon are just 2 acknowledged bastards by him, done out of the courtesy of their noble mothers. By his death, Aegon had 9 claimed bastards, and an uncounted for amount of unacknowledged ones. He had no obligation to consider those his own. This married man would share his bed with one of his many mistresses, Lady Barbara Bracken, belonging to a house from the Riverlands. Her father was the hand of the king at the time, which explained her place at court. When Aegon's sister wife was in bad shape after giving birth, Lord Bracken saw an opportunity to try and make his daughter Barbara the next queen. Aegon and Barbara did have a bastard together, but her father's ambition went too far and got them removed from King's Landing and sent back to Stonehenge, their seat in the Riverlands. Aegon's next mistress was Melissa Blackwood, another lady from the Riverlands. King Aegon previously named some of their disputed land Barbara's Teats after his old mistress, but would rename it Missy's Teats after his new mistress when he heard that Barbara was insulting Melissa's body. He even took these lands from the Brackens and gave them to the Blackwoods. That's just the kind of man and shitty king that he was, making detrimental decisions on a whim. Melissa had 3 bastard children with Aegon. Brynden, along with his 2 sisters, Gwyneth and Maya Rivers, all allowed to remain at court, giving them huge advantages in life, while Aegon and his mother were tossed aside. This reignited an old feud between the 2 Riverland houses, which took sibling rivalry to a very dark place. The hate Aegon had to Brynden specifically was consuming, and lasted their entire lives. I mean, Brynden also did hate his half-brother, but his character just wasn't defined by it. Their nicknames soon overtook the usage of their birth-given names. Brynden was commonly called Lord Bloodraven, before we came to know him as the Three-Eyed Raven. Bloodraven referring to a red birthmark, kind of in the shape of a raven. Aegon got the epithet of Bittersteel, which describes him perfectly, always bitter and looking for any excuse to bring out the steel. Their female siblings, sharing the river's name, don't have a single thing written about them aside from their names. But they, along with Brynden and Aegon, and all the other acknowledged bastards, became legitimized children by their father while on his deathbed. Not to reward them or anything, just out of spite for his heir, to make his life more challenging. Legitimizing a bastard does happen here and there, like in the instance when Ramsay Snow became Ramsay Bolton, but nothing like this. Kids instantly thrown into the line of succession, for no reason. Ramsay had to win his spot in the family. Aegon, Brynden, Gwyneth, and Maya kept their river's name, but were technically now Targaryen princes and princesses. A couple generations back, another bastard from House Blackwood made a name for himself, fighting for one side of the Targaryens during a civil war between the family. Robb Rivers is remembered as the best archer in Westeros during his time, earning the nickname of the Bowman of Raventree, which does fit the theme with his family. But there's a lot of parallels between his character and Bloodraven's. Both are known to use bows as their choice of weapon. Bloodraven used an iconic bow made of weirwood, very symbolic to his character and the family ties with the old gods. It's possible Red Robb Rivers used the same, but we're just not filled in with that much detail on this very minor character in the lore. House Blackwood is one of the last houses in the Riverlands, in fact all the 7 kingdoms that still follow the old gods outside of the north. And that's because they actually originate from the north, and only migrated to the Riverlands after being driven out of their home by the Starks in ancient times. Red Robb commanded 300 archers during the Dance of the Dragons, just like how Bloodraven is also mentioned to have commanded 300 archers, called the Raven's Teeth. Robb and some of his men are responsible for the death of a Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, so his title of the greatest archer of his time checks out, though it is likely he died during the Civil War. During this same time period of Rob Rivers lived a character named Alice Rivers, and she's a complicated one. She's a bastard of House Strong, who ruled over the largest castle in the realm for a time, Harrenhal. But it isn't even clear who her parents were, with conflicting information naming a couple Lord Strongs. But it is clear she does belong to this line. She's one of few characters with exceptional magical abilities that do match the skill set of a Red Priestess to the Lord of Light. There's a lot of back and forth with trying to put an age on her with no conclusive number. With all this mystery shrouded around Alice, it's possible she was a priestess trying to infiltrate a powerful family because she does eventually come for the throne. We saw Melisandre manipulate her appearance to easily achieve her goals, so Alice could have been doing the same. But her story begins as a simple serving woman within Harrenhal, who previously had stillborns, so provided as a wet nurse within the castle. There are claims of her dabbling in potions and spells, others calling her a woods witch who bathed in blood to preserve her youth. A Targaryen prince personally ended the House Strong line for siding with the other half of the Targaryen family during the Dance of the Dragons, but kept Alice alive. She somehow seduced the much younger Prince Aemon Targaryen, the same man who killed her family, and soon were sharing a bed. Her influence over him was growing strong, to the point where he didn't want to leave her side, even in the midst of a war. And, surprise surprise, Alice would soon become pregnant with Prince Aemon's child. With the guidance of her visions she would see in the flames, Alice led her lover to the location where probably the greatest battle in the story's history took place, between two dragon riders. When Aemon finally found his opponent who he had been looking for, who happened to be his uncle, Prince Daemon, Daemon asked him, "Who told you where to find me?" "My lady," Aemon answered. "She saw you in a storm cloud, in a mountain pool at dusk, in the fire we lit to cook our suppers. She sees much and more, my Alice." And then, not far from Harrenhal, the two Targaryens fought to the death, while Alice Rivers watched on. After the Civil War ended, no one ruled over Harrenhal after the extinction of House Strong. The castle along with Alice were forgotten, since more pressing matters remained than a castle everyone already believed to be cursed and too bothersome to look over. But after a couple years, reports of outlaws and robber knights came pouring in from this location, with a witch queen ruling over them. When it came time to reclaiming the castle for the crown, a Kingsguard member was dispatched with 100 men. When the knight found Alice, she had a young child by her side, who she claimed to be the true-born son of Prince Aemon and rightful heir to the Iron Throne. The Kingsguard made his rude remarks at her claim, at the cost of his life. Apparently his head spontaneously exploded right there in front of everyone in that moment. Then his men were chased off. Some didn't escape and were tortured by the Witch Queen. She let one return home with a message. "I'm to tell you what she said," he gasped, "but you can't laugh. The widow put a curse on me. Any man who laughs, I die. Don't come again unless you mean to bend your knees," she says. "Any man who comes near her walls will die. There's power in them stones, and the widow's woken it. 7 save us. She has a dragon. I seen it." And then someone laughed, and he died. Her curse was real. It was like she used the force to choke him to death from a distance, because some saw imprints of a woman's fingers on his neck. Before any further action could take place, a deadly and contagious winter fever spread throughout the realm, shrouding Alice back in mystery, because we never hear about her again. This is literally where the last lore book, Fire and Blood, leaves her story arc. We do know that 20 years later, Harrenhal would be rewarded to House Losten, which means that little half-Targaryen baby didn't make it very far in his mother's hopes in becoming crowned king. Maybe the winter fever got him, but it's likely George Martin may one day revisit this part of the story when he feels like creating a volume 2 to Fire and Blood, like was announced. It's kind of hard to top these lists of characters, and I hate to be the one to carry the bad news, but the rest of the Rivers are pretty lame. Not fleshed out is what more serious reviewers would call them. There's a character named Raylan Rivers, who was a knight from House Bracken, like Bittersteel. Raylan is one of the many minor characters mentioned in the extensively detailed Dance of the Dragons lore. Further back in the story lived Samwell Rivers, who lived around 300 years in the past. Samwell was a bastard of the Lord Tully from this era. Strange, this is the only Tully family member ever mentioned to have a bastard. This poor bastard got cut in half during a Riverlands invasion though, so his parents could each get a piece of his dead body. We all know gross old Walder Frey has fathered many children with numerous women over his long life. 27 trueborns, with whoever his wife was at the time, and an unknown amount of bastards through many other women. And there's a bunch mentioned in the story. Most so minor, I don't even feel like it's worth my time or your time to put on screen. But Walder Rivers, named after his Lord Father, is kind of notable. He's actually a competent leader, which is saying a lot considering the house he hails from. He's the oldest out of Walder Frey's acknowledged baseborn children, which makes him an old man too. Like every bastard son of a lord, given a small amount of power, he now despises his Rivers title. While working to try and take Riverrun from the Tullys, Jaime considers him to be more dangerous than any of his true-born brothers. The two other living Rivers mentioned in the current story are Harry Rivers and Tristan Rivers. Harry, the bastard of Bracken, yep, another one, born to the current lord, dies early into the story fighting for Robb against the Lannisters. Tristan, the more recently introduced Rivers, is a sellsword fighting for the Golden Company, an organization founded by Bittersteel while he escaped to Essos. There is no mention of which Riverlands family Tristan hails from, but my bet is House Bracken. One last character with this name is Adam Rivers. He's a little more of an exciting read. Hundreds of years back, maybe a good 6-7 centuries, this guy actually held the title of River King. So remember when I said the Riverlands is frequently invaded by other kingdoms? Well, the best to do it were the Storm Kings from the Stormlands, another one of their neighbors. They held on to power for 300 years here, though the Riverlords rose against Storm's End at least once each generation. A dozen pretenders from as many houses would adopt the style of River King or King of the Trident and vow to throw off the yoke of the Stormlanders. Some even succeeded. For a fortnight, a moon's turn, even a year, but their thrones were built on mud and sand, and in the end, a fresh host would march from Storm's End to topple them and hang the men who presumed to sit upon them. Thus ended the brief and glorious reigns of Lucifer Justman, Marc Mudd, Lord Robert Vance, Lord Peter Mallister, Lady Jane Nutt, the Bastard King Sir Adam Rivers, Peasant King Pate of Fairmarket, and Sir Lamond Fisher, Knight of Oldstones, along with a dozen more. Being a River King obviously didn't hold a lot of weight, but our boy Adam Rivers, just a bastard from who knows where, did it, however long he lasted, before a Storm King put him on a rope and hanged him. I should probably end things here before I start talking your ears off about more Bloodraven and Bittersteel feats, because their story goes on, and will continue to go on and on with every new book Martin puts out. I'll see you guys next week.